Mhm. Do videos on both this channel as well as my other one about my two fantasy worlds. Um, a lot of the information about both of my two different fantasy worlds are mainly going to be on one of my other channels. Since that was specifically made for it, but I will be posting on here anything pertaining to filming of them, any information that has to do with that when it comes to upcoming trailers. Basically, they'll be in both places, but I'm gonna essentially talk about the different characters, both fantasy worlds, both like locations, different objects that are associated with both of them. It's essentially just a matter of figuring out if I want to post them both places or just one place once they are filmed, because I'll be filming them not live, depending on how busy I am. Once a month, maybe more. We'll see. At least right now, I'm gonna focus on. I'm gonna separate them. So 1 week I'll do my main fantasy world. Well, next week I'll probably do the other one. It just depends. I might do it to 2 days. I'm gotta figure out the details for that and everything. But this is both fantasy worlds I started creating before COVID, and it was very much basically I don't like to sit twiddling my thumbs reading for roles and auditions and everything, which tends to sort of be the thing with acting currently due to the strike and such. It's slowed down even more, and so they essentially came about by me just not wanting to sit around and just wait for a role to come and such when I could be curating it myself. And so I've first one I created, it's more developed than the second one. And the best way to describe it is that it's a feeling similar to like Lord of the Rings, but not exactly. But the other one is like has the same vibe as like Wheel of Time and some like the darker high fantasy type stuff. But so I'll be describing the characters, the locations. I'll probably focus on 1 or 2 characters a week once I do start filming, which might be when I get back from LA for my vacation. But like I'm working on maps for each of the fantasy worlds and a number of other things. But I'll be posting a lot of this stuff to my Instagram account, to my other YouTube channel that's going to be possibly mainly dedicated for all this information from both my fantasy worlds, but from Middle Earth as well, since that's what inspired me to write these. So yeah, these lives are currently short. My other life, my other life, my other, when I started doing, I'll be pre-recording all the other stuff, and when that happens, that'll be a lot longer. I haven't decided on days yet for filming, getting those done and uploaded. If I do, when I do lives, they'll probably likely be on the weekends, be the easiest for me to do. To do lives over on my other channel that's dedicated for them as well. Essentially, I'm still trying to figure everything out since this is my first time doing a YouTube channel. But anyway, yeah, some of the characters, these started out as demo reels, as scenes for a demo reel, and then slowly but surely expanded until they essentially became full-length films. I've realized and found out that there's literally no way that I can write a short film without expanding it, which ends up actually being a good thing. But essentially the screenplays are about several of the different characters that are in it, because I actually started writing a TV series shortly after Rings of Power was announced. And so due to that, I haven't abandoned that I'm still going to work on and such, because I changed pretty much the entire story for that due to going in and writing the screenplays for the characters, first, basically the history of some of the characters that will be in that, as well as flashbacks, which are vitally important to the series. And because essentially basically all my stories interlap in some manner, in some fashion. And so due to that, so like I have one character where she shows up in both her niece's story as well as her daughter's. And so due to that, it's just easier to write out the entire thing, like write out the film for her, as well as the film for each of these characters, because with quite a few of them, especially the mortal characters, they don't survive and they're not around in the actual TV series that I started writing. And so due to that, I wanted to have flashbacks to them. And as such, I realized the best way to do that was to actually write their stories. And maybe at some point I'll go back through and do actual like mini series for each of these characters that are not going to be in the main series that I'll hopefully go back to writing and finishing at some point, because their stories are actually, there's a lot more to them than just what I wrote for like the film screenplays. Especially since two of the characters, they died quite young when it comes to their age for essentially their race, because the race of men for my fantasy world is about 600 years, give or take. I gotta double check that since I need to pull up the age list for it. But the elves, of course, they're immortal. But the mortals that have elven blood in them, elven ancestry, they live for a lot longer than those that do not have that elven ancestry. And most of those that do have elven ancestry are nobles and have been around for quite a long time. Another thing is that my ages for my fantasy world, the main one, are much longer they're 6,000, each age is like 6,000 years. And there's a total of between 6 and 8 of them, more or less. There's the pre, which is basically 2 ages or so, which is just 2 to 3 ages, but are just elves. No mortals, no humans, no dwarves. Well, technically mortals are humans. So basically no half elves, none of that. And then there's the first stage of my world where there's humans, dwarves, elves, and basically there's a lot more going on. And then finally there's the second, third, fourth, fifth, and then finally the 6th stage. And essentially most of the films that I've written screenplay-wise are between the third film, the third age, and the third age and the first stage is a little bit before that. And so due to that ends up because there's quite a lot that happens, quite a lot of destruction in the first 2 ages, and then it doesn't exactly repeat, but it does. What happens in those 2 ages affects what happens in technically the third age. Each of my ages has a name, which I will also go into depth with as well. But essentially, the main characters for the film screenplays that I've written, they are essentially very, very important to the story, to basically that main timeline that I created. And that is for a reason that I will get into as I do these pre-filmed videos. And so due to that, but there's a lot of interlinking parts between the elves, the dwarves, the race of men, all of that. And essentially, at some point, they pretty much all collide. And then with my other fantasy world, it's not as developed as much, just because it's unlike my other one, which has more, basically is more complicated when it comes to storylines, character families, all of that. It's a lot less, it's basically simpler when it comes to stories. There's still some complexity to it, fantasy being that way, but their storylines are pretty much all aligned in some form or fashion. And there's not as many ages. There's a total of 4, 2 to 4. So there's not as much that happens during that time at the most. And so due to that, a lot happens later on in the stories of the characters. There's kingdoms that are neutral. There are kingdoms that are pretty much aligning themselves with these different groups. And basically, I'm not trying to give too much away, mainly due to the fact that I don't want anybody going in and trying to claim what I wrote as theirs. So I will be going into deeper depth once I do the separate videos, pre-filmed, written out, all of that. Especially I'll be doing more of them as basically, hopefully as these get filmed and such. And if I do film anything before, it will be temporarily unlisted, and then we are made private, and then it will be, once it gets to that point, it will be released. I haven't figured that out yet. I probably should, but that's basically what's gonna happen, as well as the fact that, make this very clear, both of these fantasy worlds I first thought about combining. I decided that I was not going to. As such, if I get questions about that, they are separate and they will remain separate. I thought about combining them, but realized that it didn't make sense. And so, due to that, I ended up essentially, I did move a couple characters over from it that would make better sense in the main fantasy world that I had created. Other than that, it's very different. They're two very different worlds, more or less. But yeah, I'll be showing maps of different land masses. There's been a number of other things about the flora, fauna, landscape, all of that, because all of that is very much important to the stories, as well as to these different groups of people that are within them as well. And due to that, this is sort of more or less my passion project at the moment, mainly just due to the fact that, and I actually did film a couple scenes, one from the one that I'm hoping to get filmed like soon, or at least our pre-production to film, as well as another fantasy world, as well as another character that the screenplay for that's almost done. So due to that, and that character, I have a feeling people are going to compare very much to possibly Galadriel. She is not like Galadriel at all in many ways. So let me make that clear right now. She may have the same, she may have been my inspiration for the character, but she is not Galadriel in any way, shape, or form. But essentially, each of these characters has a goal that they have to and they want to achieve, and it essentially goes around all these different jewels that basically the enemy wants, and as well as basically they don't want them, the elves and then don't want them falling into enemy hands, as well as there's a separate set of jewels that basically the only job is to protect and such. And so due to that, I have a page set up as well as a group with information for both fantasy worlds. I basically combine them in the same group, just because it was a lot easier to do it that way. And so if it's for both, I won't write if it's for Asteria for my main fantasy, or for my other fantasy world, I'll write on top the name of that fantasy world to essentially basically keep them separate, so you know what's going on with each separately. I also have an Instagram for it, which I really need to update. That's a work in progress. As well as I'll be doing videos on my YouTube channel for that. For both fantasy worlds as well. On top of also have a Twitter account as well for it, where I'll be posting updates So try and post updates as much as possible. If it's the point where we're filming, I'll do updates as best I can. But right now, it's just getting everything finalized for one of them. But I wrote them in such a way that they can be filmed, if possible, if the budget is able to, filmed at the same time, or one right after another. And that's mainly due to the fact that I wrote them in such a way that they could be done low budget as much as possible. And because fantasy, at least where I live, is hard to get a foothold. Just because where I live, we don't have any castles, we don't have any, basically everything for the forest has to be built as sets, which ups that budget. And even though we have Evermore, it still costs to film there. So just due to all of that, I wrote them in such a way that they'd be easy to film, they'd be able to film good. And so basically it's figuring out the knit and grit details as well as finalizing stuff for that. So, but I'll be trying to give updates here when able to. Basically, I'll be doing updates wherever I can. And so due to that, I think I'm going to sign off for right now. Not sure when my next live will be, but if it will likely be after I come back from LA. So bye for right now.